Dear Dr. Ligon, President of the Korea Foundation, Excellencies, dear students of diplomacy, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind invitation to join this important event. Although I am unable to join you in person, I am pleased to address you and share a few words during the Korea Foundation's 4th Public Diplomacy Week. First, I would like to extend my warm congratulations to the Korea Foundation's on its 30-year anniversary and express my warmest wishes for another 30 years and beyond of all the success. I was very pleased to learn that many young students and professionals will be participating because I believe they are the future of our world. I hope I can inspire, spark ideas and actions, or encourage you, even a little, at least some of you, to become global citizens and perhaps try out diplomacy like I did. I have also been informed that the events of this week will explore various topics such as public diplomacy's best practices, public diplomacy through culture and academic exchanges, and public diplomacy during COVID-19, and my sincere thanks go out to all the organizers and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, I have had a long career of 50 years in the foreign service and in diplomacy, and I can personally attest to the importance of diplomacy and why it is absolutely essential for a stable global community. Diplomacy is all about dialogue, negotiations, and multilateralism, and it leads to a shared sense of collective community, responsibility, and prosperity. My life coincides with the colonialism, some of the most devastating violent conflicts, brutal dictatorships, and the struggle for democracy, and the constant security threat from a hostile neighbor immediately to the north. I was raised during the Korean War and watched and helped my country grow and mature from war-stricken poverty to a prosperous and matured democracy with the help of the United Nations. I could not have known as a young boy that I would someday lead the United Nations that saved me and my country. But the experiences that go back to when I was a young student have grounded me in the importance of peace, security, and collective responsibility, beliefs that would shape my life and my tenure as UN Secretary General. During these very challenging and unprecedented times of the pandemic, diplomacy has always been all the more important. As most of you probably know, as a Secretary General of the United Nations at the time, I worked very hard to realize the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which was finally adopted in 2015. This achievement is one of the greatest diplomatic successes of my career. Not only did it require a lengthy process of preparations leading up to the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, commonly referred to as COP21, but the whole agreement was at risk of failing even at the very last moment because it required consensus by absolute unanimity. Those who read my recent memoir, which was just released this summer, would have a good sense of how it was a very nail-biting, stress-inducing moment for me towards the end of my tenure as UN Secretary General. But think of the momentous significance. Thanks to the triumph of diplomacy, we have a real plan to save the only home we have, the planet Earth. If we look at the big picture, that was just the beginning that helped set in motion the current momentum of public awareness and political will to stop merely talking about climate change and to start doing something about it. And this is why diplomacy is so important. The leaders we choose to lead our governments and organizations can have so much influence and sway on the direction of our countries. Some leaders choose diplomacy, while some choose to force their way on others. When I see or hear how some world leaders deny climate change or are unwilling to make a bold decision to combat the climate crisis, which, as young people put it, is a no-brainer, it really is difficult to understand them and their decision-making calculus. To avoid making the tough commitments and decisions to fight climate change, in other words, ensuring a sustainable future, I would dare say that it is not only irresponsible, it borders on becoming immoral. Working together with other nations through a multilateral approach, a diplomatic approach, with the help of multilateral organizations such as the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, will be critical. The Paris Climate Change Agreement and the 2030 Global Agenda for Sustainable Development, which have a very strong overlap, are probably the two most often cited legacies of my career. So many people may not be surprised to learn that I am continuing to champion for climate change actions. I am still consumed by my passions, particularly the climate crisis, women and youth empowerment, and sustainable development. Therefore, following my retirement from the United Nations, I have been leading the Global Green Growth Institute as President of the Assembly and Chair of the Council. I am pleased to share that GGGI actively helps countries accelerate their transition to green growth, strengthen vulnerable countries' resilience and adaptation, and achieve the nationally determined contributions, NDCs. More recently, not long after the World Health Organization declared a pandemic in March 2020, GGGI started to support its member countries implement green COVID recovery directed towards generating green jobs, and there are ongoing projects in more than 20 member countries. All of this is critical right now, as climate change is being felt everywhere in the world. And it's not just extreme weather events and natural disasters. We can read and hear almost on a daily basis these days about how climate change is fueling conflicts among communities, migration to flee difficult environments, and serious public health challenges. Last August, the International Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, released its sixth assessment report, which warns that global warming will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2040, far earlier than its previous projection of 2100 that was made in 2015. Without ambitious efforts to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from governments and businesses, rich and poor countries, liberals and conservatives, everyone, we will find ourselves in a very dreary world. The current path of growth, dependent on fossil fuels, and focused on short-term growth, this is not an option. We need to adopt green growth, a model of growth that is environmentally sustainable and socially inclusive, and we need diplomacy to ensure we all act together now, before it is too late. If we are to make a real difference in the fight against climate change, this decade, the 2020s, will be crucial for diplomacy. World leaders will converge in Glasgow, United Kingdom for COP26 this weekend. Let us hope that the global leaders will take an ambitious action to realize carbon neutrality 2050. Because even if we were to do everything right, starting today, the symptoms of the climate crisis, the dangerous air quality, more frequent and intense storm systems, the so-called historic floods and droughts, these will still continue for years to come because it takes time to reverse the damage we have already put in motion. We need to work together with urgency. This is diplomacy. It will require sacrifices and all our abilities for hard work and ingenuity, but it can be done. It must be done. To provide a healthy and productive future for our future generations, we have no other option but to committing to fighting and winning what will be the most important challenge of our age. And the key will be in public diplomacy, with alliances among civil societies, NGOs, international organizations, governments, businesses, and academics and philanthropic organizations. I cannot stress enough the role of young people. I hope you will invest in your skills, health, and compassion to be successful diplomats, regardless of which profession or where you live. Let us work together to make a sustainable and prosperous world for our humanity and the planet Earth. I thank you for your attention, and I wish all of you very meaningful and successful discussion. Thank you. 감사합니다.